all-out war is erupting inside the Democratic Party as Speaker in name only, Nancy Pelosi continues to lose control of her caucus, and she's losing it to freshman Congresswoman that it would be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the new extreme left.
Well, that was Sean Hannity last night on the growing tensions within the Democratic Party. It is Speaker Nancy Pelosi versus the freshman on the far left. The A-team is geared up for this one. Richard Fowler joins us, Fox News contributor, Guy Benson, political editor of townhall.com, host of the Guy Benson Show on Fox News Radio, also a Fox News contributor. And there he is, Howie Kurtz, Fox News media analyst and host of Media Buzz. All right, Guy, kick this off for us. I mean, there certainly is division, fair enough to say, within the party. How wide is that divide now?
I'm not sure it's all-out war at this point, but there are definitely simmering tensions, and some of the disdain that you sense from Pelosi talking about some of the junior members is pretty clear. I mean, she's kind of sneering at them. They're taking notice and firing back on Twitter, as they tend to do. It seems like Pelosi has a plan where she wants to actually govern and accomplish things. They want to preen and virtue signal, and some of their loud noises are distracting from her goal of governing, and that's frustrating her.
That's a problem, Howie.
Yeah, but it can't be a war because one side has no troops. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is very shrewd in her use of media and especially social media, but we all build her up. The right loves to beat her up. The left loves to praise her. In reality, she and her other liberal freshman members wield clout because of their social media profile, but they don't have many votes in the House. There's no vote on the Green New Deal. They got rolled on the emergency border bill. Pelosi rules that House with an iron fist. It was surprising to me that Nancy Pelosi picked this latest fight in an interview with New York Times columnist Maureen Dowd because they're a distraction for her.
It almost seemed intentional if you read the piece from Dowd over the weekend.
Well, Maureen,
it's as if Pelosi wanted to sit down and express this message.
Maureen brought the speaker chocolates, but she was not in a sweet mood. Yes, she took those swings.
Richard, how do you see it?
Listen, I tend to agree with Howie on this, and I think some clear-eyed realism is needed in this particular situation. Just remember this. These three members that we're talking about here, Ocasio-Cortez, Congressman four now. Even if it's four. Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley. Love Ayanna Pressley and love because she's representing her district. But let's remember, they represent 1% of the United States Congress and just over 2% of the Democratic caucus.
But are they driving the narrative? I mean, Joe Biden on the campaign trail is having to respond to comments from these freshman Congress.
You know, I think that right now, because they have some social media clout, they might be driving some of the narrative. But the truth of the matter is, if you talk to voters all across this country, even after the hit that Joe Biden took from Kamala Harris in the last debate, he seems to be at the top of the polls.
Well, here's Rush Limbaugh's take.
The left is totally crazy. They have been totally crazy for a long time. And everybody, too many people have looked at it as just a fringe minority that doesn't pose any kind of really existential threat. And that's just not accurate. They have been threatening and posing a threat for years. And there hasn't been any pushback until Trump came along.
Anybody want to take that, Richard?
Listen, I will just copy and paste everything Rush Limbaugh said about them, and I'll put it on him. He's the crazy right. Most people in the right do not subscribe to Rush Limbaugh's beliefs or views or values, for that matter. So
we'll let Howie respond to that.
Like a grain of salt.
He's a very influential voice on the right, and of course, he has a lot of ammunition now in beating up on the left. There is no question that this Democratic presidential field has moved sharply to the left. We're debating busing now and blowing up private health insurance. The Democratic establishment is very worried about this, and Joe Biden is the great moderate hope, but he hasn't been very aggressive. He's barely done any TV interviews. You know what? One of them should pull a sister soldier moment. That's what Bill Clinton went to a Jesse Jackson conference and denounced this woman who had said, let's take a week and kill black people. Maybe one of them go to the Starbucks where the police officers were kicked out and say, I think this is unacceptable. It's playing against your natural base, but it's showing leadership qualities. I'm not seeing much of that.
There are those who suggest, and a guy I'll let you hear, that we're giving them too much attention. But you can find a story almost every day that they're helping to drive, back to Richard's point here.
And I also think that the Trump campaign is seeking out those stories and amplifying them because it benefits him, both in terms of turning off independent voters to the Democrats and firing up his own base. And the Democrats keep playing in to that exact narrative. And to Howie's point about having the Sister Soldier moment or the repudiation of the hard left, Biden has done that a few times, and then he has reversed himself and apologized for it. So,
under great pressure from the progressive wing.
Exactly. So the progressive wing is having a lot of influence, not just when it comes to these types of skirmishes, but actually on policy, too. Every single one of them supports taxpayer-funded health care for illegal immigrants.
Guy brings up an interesting point here about how the Trump campaign is utilizing this and sort of weaponizing against the left. He's not the only one. A recent report came out about the top stories that are pushed on all the candidates. The top 2 stories on Joe Biden are coming from Breitbart.com. It's not coming from the New York Times. It's not coming from the Wall Street Journal. It's coming from conservative blogs. So they are trying to create this narrative that all the Democratic candidates are too far to the left, and that is indeed problematic.
Richard,
that's not true.
Conservative blogs are not forcing Joe Biden to
The top 2 stories today on Biden is from Breitbart.com.
Breitbart is not forcing Joe Biden to support taxpayer funding of abortion or taxpayer funding of health care for illegal immigrants. He's doing that all on his own because of his left wing.
I get that. I think, but let's be very clear. I think if you look at what Democratic voters are looking for right now, every single poll says the top thing they're looking for is electability, which is why Joe Biden still sits on top with Kamala Harris nipping at his heels because they also believe that she's electable. With that being said, we haven't heard anything from the Trump campaign on how they plan on fixing some of the many problems that are facing the American people.
Okay, let's bring this back to this point that Howie made a moment ago. Starbucks. Police officers in Arizona were asked to leave because someone felt uncomfortable. Marco Rubio thinks the whole place is going crazy. Here's Rubio on that. Listen. He said the following: "It's just the last 7 days we decided that Betsy Ross flag is offensive. To kick police officers out of Starbucks, boycott Nike again, Starbucks again, and now Home Depot. And to lick ice cream at grocery stores and put it back in the freezer. Has everyone gone crazy?" He's watching a lot of cable news.
In case you missed that one.
But I don't think that you could hang all of that around the necks of the Democratic presidential candidates. I do think if one of the candidates were to say what Nike did was terrible and we shouldn't be rewriting history, Betsy Ross flag or not, they would get a lot of attention. I'm going to disagree that this is all driven by the media. Certainly the media are influential. Kamala Harris has pushed Joe Biden to apologize for what he said about working with segregationist senators. A lot of this is coming from the leftward lurch, I guess I would say, of the Democratic race. The media may fuel it, but they don't create it.
Really interesting thoughts now from the BET network founder, Bob Johnson. He says this. And in questioning whether or not the Democratic Party's gone too far left. The party, in my opinion, for me personally, he says, has moved too far to the left. I think at the end of the day, if a Democrat is going to beat Trump, then that person, he or she, will have to move to the center. And you can't wait too long to do that. Richard, he supported Hillary Clinton
I get that.
in her run. He is now throwing his support behind President Trump.
Listen, Bob Johnson is a very interesting media character for sure, but one thing, he's also a billionaire. He doesn't represent the voices of millions of Americans and millions of Democrats. And I think the other point here, and talking about the Marco Rubio tweet, it's very interesting to me that he introduced a bill on the Holocaust education. I hope he adds to that education around the Betsy Ross flag and about a true American history education and just not the Holocaust.
What is the problem with the Betsy Ross flag?
No, I'm saying that we should talk about the reason why Nike pulled the shoe, right, was because the flag is used by various groups, not saying they should or shouldn't use it and not taking away from Betsy Ross's history, right, and what that flag represents to the country. But it's what that flag symbolizes today and what that flag symbolizes to white supremacists.
Nike caved to pressure from Colin
I get
Kaepernick.
that.
That's why.
And listen, I'm not against the Betsy Ross flag. What I'm saying is we need to have adequate education in our schools about what that flag is utilized for, as well as adequate education about the impact that slavery's had on this country.
Just because some fringe racists have decided to key in on the Betsy Ross flag and try to steal that for their own purposes, we shouldn't let them do that. It's our flag. It's not their flag.
I get that.
And we can't let them decide what they're going to start using that then becomes offensive to the rest of us.
I get that, Guy. But there's a larger problem happening in this country. When on the Virginia standardized test for students, they say that the people who came over here in ships from Africa are indentured servants, that is indeed problematic when they're actually slaves. And so this is a larger conversation about how we teach American history to our students.
All right, so let's bring this back.
I have not seen a statement from Kaepernick during this entire dust-up.
Well,
has anyone found one?
He tweeted.
No. He did?
He tweeted
because the company said
July.
the company said that he opposed it, and that's why they pulled it down. But I haven't seen a public statement from him.
No, he put out a tweet quoting a snippet out of context in some ways of Frederick Douglass on July 4th, basically saying
but that was days after the decision was made. Howie, have you seen one?
I have not seen any statement, but I've certainly the ripple effects are clear.
What is your suggestion?
The question is whether or not the shoe company is driving it for publicity. You know what their position has been with Kaepernick.
Right.
He's been on the payroll for some time. They're a big supporter of his social position.
Seems like he's CEO these days.
And at the end of the World Cup Championship on Sunday, what commercial popped up? It was Nike.
Seems like a really crazy and divisive way to get some cheap publicity. And Nike sells lots and lots of shoes. But at the same time, this touched such a deep cultural nerve, I think, that maybe it did end up, giving billions of dollars in free publicity.
All right, Doug Schoen talking about it. It's anybody's race now, bringing this back to 2020. Dem primary spelled trouble for moderate candidates. Ultimately, it's anyone's race, and only time will tell whether Biden will be able to hold on to his lead in the face of the progressive opposition. Richard, I'll let you take that one.
Listen, the primary season is finally getting interesting, right? We are seeing candidates duke it out for who for their ideals, and having a conversation.
Who
with the
is your
Democrat.
party's best chance?
I think we have to wait to see. I think it's very early in this primary, yet still. We have about 7 or 8 months till they cast their first ballots in Iowa. Beyond that, we have about 15 months until the actual election. So there's a lot of time here. There's a lot of things to talk about. There's only been one debate. We have another debate coming up in 2 weeks.
There is a misconception about the Democratic rank and file being more liberal, and it's propagated by activists, politicians, media people who kind of live in a bubble, particularly on Twitter. The reason that Joe Biden didn't collapse after that admittedly awful exchange with Kamala Harris is that he has a lot of support and people still think he's the best chance to beat Trump. Now, he may implode if he doesn't improve in future debates.
He has since apologized. It took him a few days.
Yeah, and this shows how Biden's instincts are just too slow for the fast pace of the campaign. You don't apologize 10 days later. You don't go through all the negative news cycles. You get it out of the way and move on if you are going to apologize.
He's not running a good campaign right now. I don't necessarily think that his struggles are tied to the fact that he's not fully progressive enough on everything. It's because people watched that debate, a lot of them said, doesn't look like he's really in full command of this performance. That, I think, was the big red flag, not the fact that he's, committing woke sins here and there.
Seems like we're making Limbaugh's point through all this, right?
No, I think
things are scattered and everywhere.
I think Guy brings up a good point, right? I think what you saw, even when President Obama had his first debate against Mitt Romney, he was a little shaky. He's not used to being sort of somebody pushing against his authority. In this debate, what we saw is Joe Biden was shooken up.
Well, let's see how he does.
And let's see how he does in the next debate.
Comment. Howie got one more.
You know what? Joe Biden not only needs to do well in debates, he needs to do more television interviews. He needs to be in the arena. He needs to stop this above the fray thing. He wants this nomination. He's going to have to fight for it.
Well, he's welcome to join us right here on American
there's
Newsroom
the invitation.
anytime.
He's always been
He is
shaky.
welcome.
We have two chairs for Joe and
Sit
Jill
down.
to come join us.
Happy to have him.